Oh, okay, good. Yeah, we'll start at 1:30. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm calling this meeting to order. This is the Laredo and Webb County Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, otherwise known as the NPO. Today's March the 15th, 2021, and it's 1:30 p.m. And we're meeting virtually. Some of us here at City Hall, others at their respective places of work and where they're at. So moving forward, I can't see much more of the agenda. Yeah. So moving on, can we have a roll call, please? Does someone?
Yes, sir. Ms. Briones, can you call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Honorable Tano Tijerina. Honorable Jesse Gonzalez.
Present.
Honorable John Galo. Honorable Mayor Pete Sines.
Present.
Honorable Councilman Ruben Gutierrez Jr.
Present.
Honorable Dr. Marte Martinez.
Here.
Honorable Vanessa Perez.
Present.
Mr. David Salazar Jr.
Present.
Mr. Humberto Tito Gonzalez Jr.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, you do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Moving on forward, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Moving on to citizens' comments, we do have some protocols here. Anyone wishing to make a comment can dial 956-794-1623, and we'll get to your comment. Currently, we don't have anyone that has called, Mr. Kirby,
No,
saying
sir.
that no?
But if we
Okay.
do receive, we'll let you know. And if I could also use this moment just to let the public know and let y'all know that there is a delay, a few minutes delay from what's being broadcast on Spectrum Channel 1300 and also the city's website and the meetings going on right now. And also to remind everybody that if you're not muted, if you could please mute your mic, it really helps with the audio quality. I may mute you if you forget, and don't mean to be rude, just want to keep good audio quality. And we'll let you know if anybody calls in throughout the meeting.
Great, thank you. Moving on to the next item, and that's items requiring action, and that's the approval of the minutes for February 22nd, 2021. What says committee members? Do we have any changes, additions?
Motion to approve as written.
Okay, there's a motion by Dr. Marta Martinez to approve.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Councilmember Vanessa Perez. Discussion. None heard. Motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Raise show of hands if you object. None seen, none heard. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item is discussion with possible action on the formation of a freight and logistics committee as a subcommittee of the MPO, similar to the technical committee and active transportation committee, and any matters related thereto. If you all recall, I'm not quite sure whether at the last meeting or at the workshop that we had, this item came up. It appears that we do have a lot of interest, at least that people have called me that they wanted to see this again. Here, I do want to just mention to the group that City Council separately, also would want to consider something similar to this. I think it's needed, be it in both places or one place if we decide that that's where it should go. The last week I joined a meeting, a TxDOT meeting, and what was impressive that I saw was the El Paso group. Apparently they do have a steering committee with members of both Mexico, the Juarez area and the El Paso area, and they meet regularly, to discuss all sorts of transportation issues, infrastructure, and whatever applies to to the ports of entry, and well, not ports of entry, but more so on the transportation side. So, and just by way of history too, about 2-3 years ago, we tried doing that. At least City Council and myself and others, but just again by way of history and not intending anything on the negative, it didn't quite got us there because as you can tell, and you know, some of us that are involved in the this business, so to speak, government and private business, we have a group from Tamaulipas and we have a group from Nuevo Leon, and somehow, you know, we couldn't get, you know, above all of that. So I don't know. You know, hopefully this time we can, because we need both Nuevo Leon and Tamaulipas members, if that's where we want to go, to include our counterparts in Mexico, which I would encourage. I think we need to hear from them because we're all one region, one community. So anyway, that's a background, and it got a little messy there because Tamaulipas wanted to have their own people with us, and Nuevo Leon kind of, you know, they didn't mind being with the Tamaulipas folks, but I think you know, they see themselves as competitors in some areas, and in some areas they see themselves as a region, which that's the way we see it, simply because we have interest on both states, you know, through the bridges, Colombia, Nuevo Leon, and the World Trade Bridge at Tamaulipas. Anyway, that's some background, but I think it's something that we should definitely consider. Any other discussion by anyone? And I thank you, yes, Mr. Kirby, and then I see Ms. Perez.
Mayor, if I may just ask a quick question. What is the overall purpose of this, Mr. Kirby? I know you're probably going to give a little presentation, but what's the overall purpose of this particular committee as a subcommittee for the active, if you will? Just that's it. Just what's the purpose?
This is Kirby Sneidman, the MPO director here. That's a great segue. That question is a great segue because that purpose is not very defined at this moment. And as staff, what we would ask is that you allow us to complete the freight and logistics infrastructure plan that we're going to be starting here very soon. And I'll be going over with you later in the agenda about the different plans we're going to be engaged in. And that will then give a purpose to the committee. It will give them content to meet on, a direction of what to do when they do meet, how often they're going to meet, what subjects they're going to tackle. What I'm a little worried about with the cities committee is that it's okay to form a committee on an idea or a subject to meet on, but then once they meet, what are they talking about? What are they discussing? And if there might be a few pressing things, but if there's nothing after that, then it can quickly fall apart, which I'm guessing is what happened to the last committee a few years ago that was attempted. So we want to make this one very well defined, where they give input along the process, how they give it, how often they meet, so that they know what they're meeting on, and we can include all the people at the table. One thing I'm very excited that we're going to work on, that I also heard in that El Paso meeting, they're working on a binational study of how their transportation integrates, and we want to do the same thing here. When we're modeling not just our traffic on our side, but we're modeling both our commercial and our regular traffic on this side. We could do that in one model and really get an understanding of where we need infrastructure in the future, having not only our input, but their input on that side as well. That could be a great source of input for this committee to be able to provide some expertise on where new infrastructure is needed around the city.
Yes, Mr. Gonzalez. Oh, yes, Doctor, go ahead, then we'll go to Humberto Gonzalez. Go ahead.
Thank you. Listen, Mayor, I think it's kind of preliminary. The city's committee is still not quite there yet as far as figuring out the purpose. And I think the discussion at this point, I get it. I understand the discussion regarding international cooperation as far as transportation is concerned. But I think it's just a little early to really discuss this because we don't even know what it entails yet, Mayor. I think it's a good idea, but we have nothing in front of us to demonstrate what it's going to be, what the purpose is, none of that stuff. And we're still working on our end on the city side as well. So I'd like to hear more before we take any action at all, because I don't feel comfortable with the purpose of it, who's going to be included, or any of the stuff right now. And I think that's what Mr. Snyderman is saying as well, because I think it's premature for it to be on here requiring action.
Okay. Mr. Gonzalez, before calling you, Mr. Gonzalez, I do, when you made that reference, Mr. Kirby, to, the infrastructure, the freight studies, part of that border master plan, we do have a regional, the Laredo regional area, which may be a little too large, but maybe, maybe that group of people, that body that meets regionally, could be of some help at some point. I'm not saying now, but at some point, to get the perspectives of both, the Mexicans and of course us here. But that's just an idea. Mr. Gonzalez, go ahead.
Yes, Mayor, Humberto Gonzalez, Texas. I wanted to yield the floor to Councilwoman Perez. I think she had a question before me, so I'll let Ms. Perez go first, and then I'll follow her up if I can.
Okay, Ms. Perez, yes, go ahead, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Well, yes, I had brought the idea of the city committee, the trade committee, and we're actually finalizing that probably this week. We had a meeting and it got rescheduled. So, but I do think that there's room for more than one committee, especially if on this one, we're going to try to focus more on the international side. I can tell you from experience, every day this past week, FM 1472 has been horrendous for the residents trying to get into this area. I'm sure it's been the same for the trade community. There have been some breakdowns at the World Trade Bridge on the Mexican side, and it's really affecting us over here. The citizens are getting after me and saying that they want, the traffic cleared up. And I know a lot of these issues that they're having on the other side are out of our control, but maybe through this type of committee, we can begin to coordinate better and see how we can help them, because it's something that we have to address and fix, because it really does affect us. And it's problematic. Ambulances can't get through. People can't get into town. It's impossible to get anywhere, especially since we only have that, if you're in Green Ranch or in La Bota or in Deer Creek, you have to go on FM 1472 at least until Killam Industrial, and Killam Industrial left-hand turn is impossible. So you keep going all the way to the loop, and by the time you even have a chance to get out, if you are lucky enough on Killam to take a ride and go down Riverbank, you still have to do a loop and come around and come back up on Fasken. So you're talking people stuck in traffic hours, and then the overpasses are the traffic so backed up that people taking the shortcut routes, the overpasses, are stuck. They're stuck there for hours. So if we can facilitate coordination and communication with the Mexican side, and if that would be the purpose of this committee, then I'm all for it.
Yes,
Yeah, Mr. Gonzalez, I'm sorry.
yes, Tito Gonzalez, Texas. Again, being that I was able to serve on the technical committee with Mr. Steinman for about a year and a half as a vice chairman, I kind of want to echo the sentiment of what Councilman Martinez mentioned. And I think it's important that, these technical committees, when you think about it, I mean, they really have the opportunity to strengthen the MPO as a whole, right? If we can have these strong technical committees and make sure that we have a clear defined scope, the right personnel on it, it'll really make our job as policy committee members a lot easier when information is brought to us, and help us make more educated and informed decisions. So I think it's important, that we do have these committees, but I want to echo what Councilman Martinez mentioned, that we need to make sure that they're clearly defined and we have a clear goal in place of how we want to get that accomplished. But again, I think it's a great idea. As coming from the Texas side, as always, everything that we do, we try to put as much analysis and research into all the decisions we make, stewards of the taxpayers' money. And we need to make sure that we are justifying all the decisions we make to the public. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Judge, we haven't heard from the county side. Any thoughts or anyone from the county that may have some statements or comments so to guide us as well?
While the county's getting ready to comment, may I make another comment, Mayor?
Yes, sir, go ahead, please.
So again, just to reiterate, this is something that we have spoken to the policy committee about, that we want to establish this subcommittee for the MPO. Well, all that we're asking is let us go through the planning process first, the freight logistics infrastructure plan, expect about a year or so. And again, we'll review that. That's part of the agenda later today, talk about what we're doing in terms of plans. And then that way, when we do put this committee together, they have a very well-defined scope. But I'll just say briefly, one of the big parts that's been missing in this MPO and going forward, we're definitely seeking to remedy is that public input, both informally, having more meetings, engaging the public more, but also formally having committees such as a freight logistics infrastructure committee. Now, what Councilmember Perez is talking about, dealing with operations, maybe dealing with issues with the city, or maybe there's a traffic issue, that would not necessarily be the scope of this committee. This committee would very much be focused on what is the infrastructure we need in the short term and in the long term, so that we can continually maintain the commercial, infrastructure traffic or the freight and logistics traffic of this region. And so that's one of the components. When we last time did a call for projects, we received 3. And the call for projects is when, as an MPO, when we're doing our long range plans, like our MTP, we say, okay, everybody, TxDOT, county, city, school district, every group out there, what infrastructure projects do you think we need to build? And we got 3. So the bulk of what we got in our MTP was just from a model that our consultants put together years ago. Coming around this time, when we go through this process again, we hope to get dozens, if not more, calls for project, which means we have to have those established partnerships. We have to be out there actively talking with the stakeholders, saying, where do you think we need to make investments in transportation? Not that all those will get built, but it'll give us a much better picture, much better idea, much better general public input, so that we can make better decisions in the future.
Thank you. Do we have anyone from the county? And then we'll go back to Ms. Perez. Mrs. Perez. Anyone from the county? Okay. Yeah, Councilmember Perez?
Well, then if that committee's,
I'm sorry. Yes, Judge? Are you with us?
Sorry, I was waving my hand for a while.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
Yeah, I
apologize.
can't see
Good
you.
afternoon. I'm sorry. I just got in right now. We had a situation over at Bruni, and we did with Congressman Cuellar, we did some water. Anyway, we had a meeting over there, and I just got in, so I apologize for being a little late.
No, Judge.
I am seeing what the item is. I've kind of heard a little bit of what's going on, and I think it's important. Me, myself, and I don't know what direction we've gone to, or where we're going, or what we're heading, but I think the MPO is the actual avenue that we should be. As far as the logistics committee and the freight and logistics committee, I think this is our job. I think it's fine that we're going to put a committee together, but we shouldn't forget that the number one responsibility for us is not only to be able to get the traffic flowing within the city limits and in the outer limits, but I think it's our job as the MPO. If we especially want to keep hanging our hat on being the number one inland port in the United States, it's our job, it's our responsibility to be able to start working on some of this stuff. It seems like we're always, in order for us to keep number one, I keep talking about that second, the 405 bridge. There's situations that, we've been dealing with certain situations and aspects of this whole deal, like Mines Road. Mine Road is only going to grow so much, and we've tried it and figured out it's going to take billions of dollars, if not, a lot of it. But I'm just saying that I just think we need to be able to continue some way, somehow forward thinking, some way, somehow inspiring others to also just not look at just one. Because you have another industrial park that's popping up. I mean, everybody talks about Mines Road being the industrial park, and right now it is. But let's not forget, Bridge 1, hello? Bridge 1 everybody said when Bridge 2 was made that they didn't want to move their logistics company around. Hey, it followed Bridge 2. Bridge 2, then all of a sudden Bridge 3, now we have this one. Everybody said they couldn't afford to move Bridge 2 from Bridge 2. As time goes on, we have to expand. And history has proven that wherever it goes, it's going to follow, wherever our freight will go. It saddens me that El Paso has seven bridges, and 3 of them are commercial bridges, and they're ranked 16th in the nation. It's sad that we have to go through that when we are the number 1 in the nation, and we have one and only one. And then we have a situation on Mines Road that we can't get out of. We have to expand ourselves, is what I'm saying. And so if this is the case, I'm all for it, but we have to be true to what we are and what we're doing here. So my advice is, yes, we have a technical committee, very much so, but we also have to be the champions on this board to be able to move the freight and be able to move the people free to go and be able to move them freely, I should say. So those are my comments. I'm not sure if it was that kind of subject, but anyway, I said my piece and I'll continue listening. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Judge. It was helpful. Yes, Ms. Perez.
Thank you, Judge and Mayor. So if Mr. Seidman, if that's not going to be any purpose of this committee, then is there anything in the works for us to address that issue that I brought up? I don't know if anybody else here experienced any of it last week, but it was pretty bad. As far as the breakdowns between 6 p.m. and 12 p.m. at night or midnight.
Those are definitely good issues, but the MPO is not the right forum for that. TxDOT, when we talk about the operations and maintenance of our on-system roads, TxDOT, the MPO is looking at the future. It's looking at the long-range plan. I know sometimes there's been a temptation in the past to use this committee as a way to, bring up issues of operations or maintenance or traffic issues you're experiencing right now. And those meetings are better taking place with TxDOT out of this meeting. They'll gladly open their doors to you. That's been my experience when I work as the city planning director capacity working with them. They'll always take your meeting. They'll always listen to those issues there. And I don't know if Tito or if Mr. Salazar, you want to speak to that, but certainly the MPO would be better focused on longer term, what we're doing to plan for the future and leave those operations and maintenance to the city and to meetings with TxDOT.
Thank you, Mr. Schneidman. This is David Salazar. Getting a lot of feedback here. First, I'd like to comment on the subcommittee as far as the MPO. I think in the past, the most vital part of the technical committee and the policy committee has been interaction with our local counterparts, industry, different council folks, or our county commissioners and whatnot. So if we can reflect on I think it was brought up the El Paso as the technical committee, I would caution as far as a subcommittee to the MPO. While I do think that having a committee like this is unbelievably a great asset to the MPO and the local folks of the city of Laredo, I think, Mr. Schneidman, your strides in moving forward as far as getting an MPO chairman that is not a city employee is in a great direction. And I'd like to remind everybody that the technical committee is a key component of the MPO. The technical committee is maybe something that we need to focus on. That is where you have the different representation of the community to help assist in the direction, as Mr. Kirby Schneidman was saying, the direction of where we're trying to head, the direction we're going. While these freight and logistic committees are a great asset, tremendous asset, I would caution as a subcommittee to the MPO. There may be some conflicts in there as far as the direction that we need to be taking. I also believe if you want to look back at the El Paso MPO, if we look at the members that they have in the MPO, you look at the members that are in the MPO policy committee of down in the Rio Grande Valley, while they do have a 15-member committee on the MPO, they went from 35 members to 15, and they're still looking to reduce that. Some of the better, greater MPOs throughout the state of Texas have a MPO policy committee of 5 members only. And why I bring that to light is that they have very strong committees, technical committees, that by the time it comes to the MPO policy committee, the only thing that's left is a voting action on that. And to echo Mrs. Perez's comments, yes, absolutely. The issues that are on Mines Road, they need to be brought forth on committees such as this, as technical committees. So when we get to this point, we can move forward in the direction of what we're trying to get to. I know I didn't quite answer her question, but in regards to the congestion on Mines Road, if you ask me right now, what is it like on Mines Road? It's congested. But through the previous actions of the MPO and the Mayor Meek Size, who was a great backer of that, the Fast Lane project is coming. We do have the left turn project that we're going to let this month to assist that. Currently working on Route 3 outside, currently working on Viceal. And also these solutions don't seem to come fast enough. We have been working on them to get to this point so we can move forward. But she does bring a great point as far as operations with our Mexican counterparts and our customs and DPS on this side of the border. You know, we can have 100 lanes on Mines Road and I-69, but if I'm only crossing 2 lanes at a time, we're turning that into a parking lot. So it is very vital that these committees, as Ms. Perez stated, have interaction from our counterparts in the operations on how to quickly and vastly get a lot of these commercial vehicles in and out of the state. And with that, I'll pause and see if anybody's got any questions or comments.
Mr. Salazar, just to follow up to that, when we're talking about planning and infrastructure versus operations and maintenance, if somebody has an issue dealing with operations or maintenance, where would you prefer that be brought? Would you want to be brought to the MPO through a committee, or would you prefer that be a meeting that the city approach you or the county approach TxDOT, have meetings outside of these formal MPO meetings? How would you like to proceed with that?
That's certainly an excellent question, Mr. Steinman, and I appreciate you bringing that forth. And I apologize if I rambled and didn't quite answer your question, but you're absolutely right. Operation and maintenance of those highways, and we've been through this before. A quick phone call to our local district office, we can assist that. Long-term planning, you know, additional lanes, bypasses or whatnot, that is something that should be discussed at the technical committee here and brought forth with TxDOT as well to bring to a project. But when it comes down to operation and maintenance, you know, the timing of a lighting, the payment on the roadway, that is something that you can most definitely call our local office down here. A lot of you have my phone number and have called me before. A short phone call and email, and we can respond to those.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. I just wanted to make that clear because the expectations of the policy committee members, y'all, and also the public, when they come to this meeting, it's so much more effective if we understand what the purpose of this MPO is. It's not a space for us to address all of our issues with TxDOT. This is an opportunity for city, county to come together and to look at the future. What are we doing for the future to make sure that transportation in this region and this community continues to support the population and the businesses that are here? And that is pretty much the single mission of this MPO. Well, it can be a space for us to come together on other ideas. Then we start to dilute our effectiveness if we don't remember what our prime directive is.
Okay, so if I gather then, based on what was said, is that there's a strong inclination that we use to expand possibly the technical committee, but for a long-term planning and not necessarily have a subcommittee, that the subcommittee possibly could be, you know, could fare better, I think, in the city council arena. But that's more or less what my conclusions from this. But also on the operational maintenance, which are the immediacy of the issues that we have at hand. Basically, the saying is, contact TxDOT directly. And with that in mind, I know on a sidebar, and we don't have to go in detail, but traffic light synchronization, Mr. Salazar, I know we covered that last time, or Mr. Schneidman. Is that something that that we should, touch again, because, that's low-hanging fruit. I know we did it, and do we need to adjust again to get that traffic more fluid? And if you all don't have an answer now, maybe we can put it on the next agenda item, or we can have a visit, private visit, as Mr. Salazar is suggesting.
Yeah, certainly, Mayor. The low-hanging fruit, if y'all can recall, we had a list of priorities that was done on a TTI study for the Mines Road intersection. And so far, we've brought a lot of those to light with the assistance of the RMA and Ms. Montemayor. The left turn lane at Killam Internet Industrial is one project that's coming forth. As far as traffic signalization, we have covered a few projects, including with Ms. Perez, as far as what we're going to let this summer to assist with a lot of the traffic on that intersection and movement, and how we are going to increase that. And those are a few of the projects that we brought forth that, as the mayor discussed, were low-hanging fruit. So those are projects that we see coming forth. And certainly, we can discuss, or if asked, bring a presentation forth as to what we do have coming forward.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mayor?
Yes, sir, Judge.
So I guess my question would be we're doing another technical committee, but don't we have other committees already out there, i.e. like the Border Trade Master Plan? Don't we have also like the Bridge Master Plan? All these kind of people have been sitting on, giving their opportunity to speak and figure out other studies. I mean, this is just another way. I just would hate for this to be stalling all these other committees or boards, or however you want to call it, meetings that people have been investing some time and effort into it, and then here we're doing this again. So I just don't want to be tripping over ourselves. Basically, what are we doing with this and why?
Yeah, that was a thought that I had at City Council. Let's not duplicate too much unless we see a benefit, that will materialize. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Steinman. No, Mr. Okay, Dr. Martinez, and then we'll go to Mr. Steinman.
Yeah, I think we've discussed this a lot, Mayor. We're not quite ready there. Can we move on to the next item? I think we can bring that back in a year or so whenever they're ready. I think we've already heard recommendations to wait a little bit on this. So if that's okay, Mayor, I'd like to just move on to the next item. I think we're not quite ready on this one.
Okay, Mr. Steinman, thank you, Doctor. Mr. Steinman, and then we'll see what others have in mind. But yeah, I think we need to move on.
Okay, just to sum up, to answer the judge's question, a few months ago, we proposed to do a freight and logistics infrastructure plan, the acronym FLIP. And with that plan, we would bring forward a subcommittee, kind of like the Active Transportation Committee. We would bring forward a freight and logistics committee. And then about a month ago, the city council as well proposed to put together a freight and logistics. I'm not sure exactly what you're calling it, Councilmember Perez, I forgot. And then there was a little bit of confusion. Is this duplication in both of these committees? But here's what we're proposing. We're going to do a plan, a freight and logistics plan, a master plan for the region. Right now, we're doing a bridge master plan, and that's focusing on the bridge. We're going to focus on the rest of the infrastructure in the region and how that feeds into those bridges. That's why we want them to finish that plan first, or get significantly through, make significant progress on that plan. So we'll start this plan, and I'll be showing you later in the agenda. We'll be starting this plan sometime later this year or early next year. We'll need about a year to complete. And in that process, we're going to be recommending forming a committee that's just looking at, they're not something that everything has to pass through them to get to you. It's more like an advisory committee where they're looking at and providing recommendations for infrastructure related to freight and logistics. And then that's another source of input that then you get to consider, you get to be the decision makers on. So we're going to put together through that planning process, the purpose, the mission, the scope, all those things will get figured out so that we don't just start a committee and then they don't really know what to talk about. We're going to make sure it's very focused and they have a very well-defined mission and scope. And we're going to make that table very wide. We want to have representation from any and all on this and the other side to give us the best information and best input possible. But like Councilmember Martinez said, that's probably about a year or so out from now because we don't want to rush into it. We want to make sure we're doing this in a very methodical way.
Okay, unless we have any objections. Yes, go ahead.
Mayor, I was just gonna add that the one for the city is gonna be created way sooner than that. So maybe let the one from the city go, and if MPO wants to create it, then maybe they can coordinate with it from there, or maybe that committee can serve to help in with that input that is needed for that part of the MPO. But I think we're gonna move forward with the city one then first.
Yeah, I think that's probably the more appropriate step, from my end as well. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, anyone else? And if not, we need to move on.
I'll just say one really quick, the one reason we did want it to be, not that, there won't be any conflict if the city has one. I think the more input you can get, the better. But the idea of having it at the MPO was because we definitely want the county to be included in that process, not for it to just be a city committee. We want it to be a regional committee that serves the county, serves the city, serves the whole region, and that was the plan with what we are proposing. So there probably will be, because we don't want too much duplication. We'll be working with y'all very much, Councilmember Perez, because we don't want to have conflict. We want to work together, and we'll definitely consider that as we're putting together this plan.
And we definitely need the county as well. So, okay then.
Well, but just real quick to finish this off, the Board of Trade Master Plan has already been done. It's about 400-page report. So I don't know how you guys or how it's working, but maybe these could be considered subcommittees being taken into the MPO. And Kirby, I totally agree, and I appreciate you saying that the county does have to be a part of this. So I don't know if we want to consider some of these committees that have been, whether it's the county or the city, bring them into the MPO, because I don't know how a county or a city could do them by themselves other than just have a plan. The MPO could actually create it and could foster it, could mature it, could water that seed to mature. So I'm just thinking out loud, but maybe that's something that we could also do. But I appreciate, the county does have to be a part of this.
Definitely, thank you. Yeah, moving on to C, a discussion with possible action on the Chad Ruthinger. Yeah, there was a lot of questions raised last time, so we need some answers. So I don't know who's going to speak to that. It was primarily on the county side. Judge, do you have anyone?
Good afternoon, Mayor. This is Guillermo Coyad from Webb County. Just briefly, we are working with a consultant to have all the pending deliverables sent to TxDOT by March 26th. And that should pretty much conclude all the work that we have with our consultant, Dannenbaum Engineering. That's all I have as far as county work is done.
Okay, this shouldn't prolong the project further. And if it is, do we have any idea how much longer it's going to take, if at all?
Mayor,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Coyal.
I was going to say that it should not prolong the work. I know we're working with TxDOT on this, and we both concur that it should not prolong the project at all.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Judge, as well on the county.
Mayor, this is David Salazar with TxDOT. And just a brief summary, and Mr. Gonzalez is here to answer any details of where we're at. But for the most part, the city of Laredo, as well as the county of Webb, will be receiving letters with my signature today to amend the current documents that we have in place. The gist of the amendments is allowing TxDOT to take over on the environmental clearance of the projects. We will be utilizing a contractor that's on board and ready to go now. We need to have this accomplished so we can proceed with the PS&E of the project as well, which is the design of the projects, so we can move forward. None of these actions that we're taking should delay the project anything, and still has the same letting date. So bottom line, those letters should be coming to Judge Tano Tijerina and yourself for the amendment of these contracts. We have been working diligently with city staff and Webb County staff. We've had couple of meetings at the request of the county last week with them. And Mr. Cuellar certainly, and from forward, I think they've done a tremendous job of helping us get to this point so we can get this project to fruition everybody's waiting for and not delay it any further.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. Also, too, parallel to this, we had the issue of title, and I believe Mr. Ramon Chavez from the city was kind of keeping tabs on that for us. Mr. Chavez, any other report that you may have?
Honorable Mayor and members of the committee, Ramon Chavez, City Engineer. Not at this point, Mayor, just the same as last time. The land has been swapped, and we're just waiting for those title commitments. But the land has been swapped according to Mr. Betzenberg.
Okay, so that should uncomplicate or further simplify, hopefully the transfer. The question would be who's going to end up with title at some point, and I guess we need to answer that when you all have the answer. And if it,
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
We've had those conversations with TxDOT already, as it was mentioned right now. So we'll be working on all this to make sure we don't delay it.
Okay, so the ultimate goal then is for TxDOT to own and be responsible for the maintenance of the Chad Ruthinger. Is that correct? Is that the goal?
That is correct, Mayor. It is in the letters that came to you and the agreement of our future plans to take over the Ruth and Child project into. It's all described in the letter that you'll be receiving, as well as the amendment that's coming to the county and the city. I think Mr. Gonzalez probably has a little bit more details. I don't know if he wants to provide any additional comments on that, Tito.
Yeah, good afternoon, Tito Gonzalez with TxDOT. No, David, I think you pretty much summed it up. Mayor, that is the end goal, to have TxDOT take it over and bring it on system. It will, as we've mentioned with the city and the county, it will have to occur in two phases, two separate amendments. This first amendment that we're sending over, that you will be receiving, will allow us to get the environmental completed, get the started, and with that environmental clearance, it will allow the city to complete the right-of-way acquisition process. So once that gets done, we will look at in the near future, hopefully, doing a follow-up amendment to begin the transfer of the roadway on system. And that will eventually nullify the city's financial obligation on the construction portion of a Char Ruth. So that is the plan that we are currently working towards.
Okay, thank you. Just so you can remind the committee, and if you have that date, when is the expected completion date of all of this? So at least the public, are we talking 2.5 years still?
Yeah, currently, Mayor, we have the project slated for August of 2023, and that, again, due to the funding that is assigned to this project, Category 7 funds that was allocated by the MPO, the current letting date would be August of 2023.
Okay, and that would probably take, what, about a year or so to construct it?
Currently, Mayor, we're looking at it, since it is an undeveloped land, we're probably looking at about between 18 and 22 months around there to get construction completed.
Okay, so we're talking 2025, more or less, when if things work out for the construction, for the completion. Okay, then. Thank you very much. Yeah, do we have any other business? Moving on. Your report, Mr. Stein? Oh yeah, the RMA. That's item Roman numeral 5A.
Yes, the RMA sent in their report. It's in the packet, but would you like to add to that at all? I know we have a representative here, Ms. Montemayor from the RMA. You don't have to, but if you want to add to that report that's in the packet. You're muted, Ms. Montemayor.
Can you hear me now, Kirby?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we can.
Yes, and so the report is accurate. The only thing that I'll add is on Killam Industrial Boulevard. We did state that the construction should start March, which is this month. We have been notified that there is a traffic signal that's imperative to be phased in first. Those traffic materials are a little hard to come by right now. And so in terms of timing, it looks like those traffic materials from the manufacturer have to be attained first. And then once those traffic materials are in hand, then we'll have a better time to be able to tell you on the construction start date. So I doubt that'll be March, but we can certainly hope and anticipate that perhaps an April start date would be more accurate. In terms of Los Presidentes, we know that MTZ Construction is the low bidder. That was awarded in January. Construction start date is going to be probably around March 27th. So later on this month, we expect to break ground on Los Presidentes. Vallecillo Road, thank you so much last month for the resolution in support of the Vallecillo Road. That project will be part of the draft UTP. So we're looking forward to perhaps that project getting funded. We'll just have to wait and see. We understand the competition is quite tough for Category 12 funds for these types of projects. Cat 12, as a reminder, is the Texas Transportation Commission's strategic priority funding. So we have a lot of projects throughout the state of Texas that are competing for the commissioner's money. Vallecillo Road will be one of them. So we look forward to perhaps talking about this project with other elected officials as the draft UTP is being developed. And, we can keep our fingers crossed that hopefully the project is then funded. Other than that, Kirby, that's what we have from the RMA. Any questions?
Any questions? If none, thank you so much for your report. Moving on to B, presentation by the MPO staff on the proposed MPO work plan. Mr. Kirby?
Yes, sir. Kirby Snideman again, your MPO director. I'd like to take about 10 minutes and give you a presentation, give you an update, and then, any questions that y'all might have. Every year, we receive a planning grant from the state, from the federal government through the state. That's how we can operate. That's how we pay for projects. If we hire consultants, it's also how we pay for our staff. Now, you'll recall a couple of years ago when I came here, I said we could do it a different way. Instead of having minimal staff, 1, 2 people, and then consulting for everything, every plan we do, we could actually hire staff and train them and retain that institutional knowledge every time we complete a plan, and also complete more plans and complete them more quickly, because our turnaround time could be quicker because we don't have to go through the procurement process every time we want to study something. Exciting thing is we're finally there. We've got a great team together. Gracie, Juan, Jason, and now Julio, our newest team member on the MPO. And we're doing some great things. Now, I wanted to keep you updated on what our plan is for what we're going to study, because usually, the minimum is the state requires that every year you come to them and you tell them how you're going to spend this money that they're giving you. And that's the minimum. It has to be at least once a year. But you can do more longer term and more strategic than that. So we're in the process right now of developing a 5-year strategic look at what we want to study. Now, that doesn't mean we'll come to you once every 5 years. We'll still come to you once every year, but we're looking not at just the next 12 months. We're looking at the next 5 years and even beyond to say, what are the issues we want to study? What are the plans we want to complete? What parts of the region, what parts of the county and the city do we need to focus in and think about the needs, the transportation needs for the future? So what I'm going to show you first, just a quick review of the website, just so you know where to get this information. And then I'm going to actually show you what we're working on for the work plan. So here's a look at our website. When you go to the website, you've got some menu items at the top. About the MPO is going to give you show you what the boundary is. It's where you can find our bylaws, which are the rules of how we have to operate. The membership of the policy committee members, the technical committee. One, let's make a note. We need to add the active transportation committee here too, so we see that membership. Our staff directory, and then some compliance documents. The next thing is the meetings. If you notice a slight change, we've been sending you, instead of the packet, we've been sending you a link to our website that takes you to this page, agendas and minutes, so that you can always know you can go here. If you lose that link or you can't find the email, you always can know you can go here, and so can the public, to get our agenda, our minutes, to see the videos of the meetings. Plans and documents. Here you can find all the plans that we're completing. as the MPO. And this is going to be really important because we're going to be doing more of this, and I'll share in just a second. You can also look at the Unified Planning Work Program. This document right here is our 1-year plan that we have to submit to TxDOT to say, this is how we're going to spend our planning grant. This is how we're spending the money you're giving us to study, not to build. Remember, this is not the money to build anything. We actually can't use it for any infrastructure. This is specifically to fund our staff and to fund our consultants if we use any. And then we've got projects. This is our listing of projects and any contracts, agreements, and MOUs. If we ever post an RFQ or RFP, that's going to be here. And then a contact us button where the public can always get a hold of us, where they can give us any questions that they have. The problem in the past of putting our emails on here is that if we put our emails on the website, it just gets crawled and then we get a bunch of spam. So like all organizations, we're moving away from that and having a contact button. So that's the website. And what I'm now going to show you is the work plan that we've been working on. So instead of just a 1 year, we're looking at the next several years. Let me zoom out just a little bit. And I want to get your input on this. So I'm going to explain each of these very briefly and then get your input on how we should either prioritize these, or if there's anything that you see that we're not focusing in on that you think, hey, Kirby, can we study this part of the city, this part of the county? Can we study this component of transportation? And then
Can
that's
you zoom in a little bit, Kirby, on the lettering?
Yes, sir. Is that better?
A little more for the older folks, myself.
Okay. How about that? Is that better?
Yeah, a lot better. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. No problem.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor.
So what we've got here is column B is, now this document right now is not shared with the public, but it will be soon. Once we kind of finished and prioritized and gotten your input, then this will become part of the actual document we submit to TxDOT, but then we'll also release it publicly so the public can see where we're at, what we're studying, what we're working on. Column B is the plans and projects, the title of the plan or the project we're working on. Columns C through G just give us some internal information about who's leading the project and who our partners are on the project. And then columns H and beyond show the fiscal years where we're the quarters. Each of these is divided up into Q1, Q2, Q3, or Q4 of any given year. And that way we know roughly how long the plan's going to take, and we can program how many plans we're doing at a time. So that way we're scheduling it correctly. Now you'll notice some of these repeat. That's because we have a few different types of plans that we complete as an MPO. We have some plans we're required to complete. The federal government and the state say, okay, every 5 years you need to make this, you need to do this plan, you need to keep it updated. Every 2 years you need to do this one. Every 1 year you need to do this. Regularly you need to update this. So that's all in here. We've programmed that so that we know what plans have to repeat. The Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the MTP, that's a plan that we regularly have to update every 5 years or so. Transportation Improvement Program, every couple of years. Unified Planning Work Program every year. Our Public Participation Plan, that's our plan for how do we reach the public? What's our process when we have public meetings? What's our process of how much time in between meetings when we notice something? Notice how we have a 10-day public hearing period. That's been developed through our public participation plan and then also in our bylaws. Those are all things we can change. We just can't change them on, willy-nilly. We have to have a plan for how we're receiving public input. That was the last time that was done was several years ago, and it's only a few pages long. We want to really buff that plan up to really understand, and this is going to be exciting. With this plan, we want to not only give ourselves a basis for how we're involving the public, but we really want to answer the question of what's the best way to reach the public in Webb County and Laredo City? What's the best way? Because I often hear the council having this question saying, well, if we do a survey, are we forgetting about the people who don't, who can't use the internet? How many people don't have internet access in the city? Do we know? That data is there, but maybe it's not really accessible. And what we'd like to do in this plan is to say, here are all the different types of people and groups in this city, represented by groups and age and their availability to certain technology. And what do they feel comfortable using as a way for us to get their input? Would they prefer us calling them? Would they prefer mailed surveys? Would they prefer the internet? Would they prefer, what's the best way for them for their voice to be heard? So we're really excited about that plan. That's something we need to regularly update, but the feds don't tell us how often. We've got a railroad quiet zone that we're currently working on. That's mostly at this point a city project, but the MPO has some involvement on that. That's line 6. Line 7 is a public transportation agency safety plan. That's currently being worked on right now. The congestion management process. That's how we're dealing with congestion in the region, how we're dealing with certain metrics, how we collect that data. And that's a process, that's a plan that we've started, and it's going to take us about a year to complete. The Transit Comprehensive Operational Analysis. This is a project that we dedicated $250,000 to. It's the El Metro's project. They're going to look at, if you recall, we hired Stantec, national experts in this type of planning, and they're going to look at operations for El Metro, the routes, how often the routes go, what kind of infrastructure, what kind of amenities, how do we better, what our fees are like, are they competitive, are they discouraging ridership, how can we increase ridership, all those questions they're going to be asking and answering in that study. And that started late last year and is ongoing. And we're going to be assisting transit in that process. A future thoroughfare plan, that's something we just brought the city council, but because it has something to do with transportation, we were able to provide the assistance on that, looking at the region, having those meetings with TxDOT and the public and many different organizations. That's something we're going to be doing at least once a year, but probably multiple times a year, because as the MPO, we have access to a lot of information and resources of both the county and the city. We can serve as a hub for helping the city understand what are the major roads they need to plan for. Now, the freight logistics infrastructure plan, we talked about this. Our plan right now is to start this in 2022, but we could move that up if that's a priority. Now, each one of these, when you click on them, it takes you to a project page that shows you all the different components that this plan will require. And, you know, this is an ongoing, this isn't all complete, it's ongoing, but this helps us understand the task we need to do to complete this plan. And this one's going to be a big one. But in looking at it, what we understood with the freight logistics infrastructure plan is that there are some really good plans being done right now that we need to wait for. The border infrastructure plan with the state, but also the bridge master plan that's being done by the city. The border master plan will be finished very soon, and the bridge master plan is about halfway through. And when they get closer to being done, they're going to have generated a lot of good data. And the question they're asking, and that's being done by the bridge and by the city of Laredo, the question they're asking is, what kind of infrastructure do they need? How many lanes? How are they servicing those lanes? What's the amount of throughput? What can they do to increase that? What we're going to be asking is, what about all the infrastructure that connects to those bridges? Is it adequate? What do we need? Are we measuring and are we tracking the growth and all of that here locally? And where does it go once it gets in? You know, the bridge, the border master plan looks at some big numbers regionally about how much infrastructure, how much freight is moving through the city. But once it gets here, where's it actually going? What local roads are they using? What on-system roads are they using? You know, one of the big questions that we always wonder about is how many of the freight and logistics companies that are here transfer loads between US and Mexican drivers? What does that look like, and what's the impact to our traffic? So those are questions we're going to answer with that, and we're also going to do a lot of public input or a lot of public outreach with those companies, make a lot of good contacts, and then, as I mentioned, we want to form a committee so that we continue to receive that input regularly moving forward. We're looking at completing a sidewalk gap analysis. So as part of the active transportation plan, which we completed earlier this year, one of the recommendations of that plan was to complete a sidewalk gap analysis. What's that? Well, pedestrians, you know, one of the big purposes of the MPO is to look at vehicle traffic. But we should also be looking at the other ways people get around in the city. And there's a large part of the population that gets around as a pedestrian, that gets around on foot? And are we considering them? And I think we are. We're concerned about them. We're concerned that they have safe crossings, that they have good infrastructure. But when we spend money on that infrastructure, it appears, well, it doesn't appear. The way that we're spending that money is not very strategic. It's, hey, I got some money, let's put it over here in my district, or I've got some money, let's put it over here in this part of the city. But is that the best place we could be spending that money to complete pedestrian infrastructure? Is it put in where there's the most pedestrian traffic? Is it put in where we have the greatest need for those that only have the ability to get around as a pedestrian? Those are questions we want to answer with a sidewalk gap analysis, and then actually perform the study to say, here, it doesn't mean you have to spend it this way, but it will say to the county and to the city, when you do spend money on sidewalks, here's your biggest bang for your buck. And it's going to be a study that's never been done in the city before, been done many other places, but never here. So we're excited about that. Downtown traffic and parking study. You know, one of the big questions, one of the big recommendations of the city's comprehensive plan was to look at downtown traffic and converting some of those two ways back into some of those one ways back into two ways. You know, if you look at the downtown area of the city and you look at how many one-way roads there are, what do one-way roads do very well? They move traffic through, but they're not really good about getting traffic in and out. It's about moving it through. Now, I would guess, and we haven't done this study yet, but I would guess that we're always probably going to want to maintain Houston and Washington as major one-ways through the downtown. But there are many other one-ways that we could convert back into two-ways. Why would we want to do that? Well, because people are wanting to live, to shop, and to recreate more downtown. And we don't want people to just be going through at high speeds. We want them to be able to access very easily and get around. If you're new to this city, even if you're not new, you might go downtown and think, oh my goodness, that's a one-way, how do I get down that? How do I come back this way? It's very easy to get confused, and we want to be able to quantify that. And have recommendations for how we could make the transition back to two ways. That obviously would come at a significant cost, and we'd want to look at where that funding could come from and how it would benefit. If we're making this change, is there a benefit? I believe there would be, and we'd want to quantify that. As part of that, we also want to do an updated parking study. The city did a parking study a couple of years ago, hired a consultant, and the result of that parking study still left a lot of questions unanswered and a lot of need that for additional study. So we want to perform that study in conjunction with the traffic department, with El Metro, with the county and city all on board, and we can look at our parking as a resource that we don't just want to eliminate, but also to be effective in how we're managing that parking. And an independent strategic MPO plan. That plan will look at how we can move from being the MPO under the city as an independent MPO that serves the county and the city just as much as well, in the region as a whole. I try my very best as a director, as both the planning director for the city and the MPO director for the MPO. I take it very seriously that in this role as the MPO director, that I serve the county and the city equally, and that this MPO should be independent and shouldn't be influenced by anybody. It should be presenting the information as best it can. But it's difficult, it's challenging when our staff are kind of intertwined with the city staff, and of course my time is only half the time for a job that's basically full-time. That makes it very challenging. It really is a full-time job, deserves a full-time director, and I'm going to present a plan to you about how we can make that strategic move to becoming a more independent MPO with its own independent director appointed by the policy committee. At this point, if the city council said, you know what, Kirby, we don't like you anymore, get out of here. If they say that, guess what? You also lose your MPO director. And what you want to be in a position is you want to have your own MPO director appointed by your policy committee who is ultimately accountable to you, to the city and to the county and to TxDOT as well. So we're going to be working towards that and putting together a plan of how you can do that. And then finally, a plan recently, we've been putting together the components of. We met with the RMA last week to discuss. We want to do a South Laredo transportation study. As you recall, the RMA completed a North Laredo transportation study, did a fantastic job. That was a very expensive plan because they had to complete all that through their consultants. But what we'd like to do is do the majority of this in-house, although there may be a technical component we need to hire some consultants on for traffic counts. But we would like to complete something similar that says, hey, here is South Laredo. Here's how we're expecting it to grow. And here is the infrastructure that we need to make sure that we continue to facilitate that growth. And our idea, unless you want us to push that up, our idea is to start that plan in later this year, 2021, and for that to be about a 10 to 14 month plan where we go through that process of asking those questions. Maybe a little bit longer if we have some challenges with traffic counts, but I would think by that time we'll be done with COVID, and so we're getting really good traffic numbers that we can use up to date. So those are the plans. This is not all that we're doing as an MPO. These are just the big plans and projects that we wanted to get your input on, that we wanted to make sure as a policy committee, you're saying, okay, Kirby, these ones are our priorities. Focus on these. And of course, they're the ones we have to do, but we want to receive your input on this. And if there's anything missing where you thought, hey, Kirby, what about this? Could you study this component of transportation in the region? We really need to look at that. Then we can also program that in to our strategic plan. I just want to stress one last thing before I turn it back over to you, Mayor, and that is that this is going to be a work in progress. We'll always be bringing this back to you. We'll always be taking your input. Although every year we submit a plan that's adopted by you, by the policy committee, we can always amend it and through that process. But the point of all of this is we don't want to be responsive. We don't want to be just looking at 12 months in the future. We want to be looking at several years in the future. And how are we spending the money that we're getting very strategically so that we can provide the best information for the city, for the county, for the region. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Just so I can make a last comment, because I've got an interview that I need to take, and Judge Tanner will preside. I know we have just one other item, I think, which is adjournment, to adjourn. But based on when I first stepped in as mayor and the MPO chair, this is a vast, huge improvement. Thank you so much. I know the digital, I guess, technology has truly improved, and we're now making use of it here. So thank you again. Beforehand, and not to criticize your predecessors, we had just documents everywhere. If you had to compile or prepare a report, you had to go through all these different files. But now it's just so easy to get to. So congratulations, and thank you to the digital improvements that we've had in the last few years. And of course, this leads to transparency, and this is what government is about as well. We need to be open and transparent, and this is exactly what this does. Thank you very much. Judge, do you want to take over? I've got to step out if you don't mind. Thank you all for.
We don't have much more, do we?
Judge, can I speak after?
Yes, ma'am. You have the floor.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I just wanted to ask, is there anything about are we working with the railroad to do overpasses? I know there's need for some overpasses for the trains. Is that in any of these plans?
That is something that I think you might find reference to in a few plans. That's not something that the MPO is working on with the railroads. That's something the city of Laredo was working on. I will, however, say that what was proposed is going to require literally hundreds of millions of dollars. And so that is going to be very, very dependent on whether or not they're able to get funding from the federal government for that. And I mean, just being realistic, my guess would be that's something maybe we could see, in 20, 30 years. Now, politics could change all that if somebody had a lot of money they wanted to put to that. But we are working on a railroad quiet zone that will make improvements along the Kansas City Southern line at all of the at-grade crossings, or nearly all the at-grade crossings. But the idea I think you're talking about is the proposal for the Kansas City Southern line to raise it up so that there were no at-grade crossings. And like I mentioned, that's going to be, very, very expensive. And because of that, it may not be, well, I don't want to say it's not likely. It's just something that is very speculative at this point, because it's so much dependent on a lot of money that we don't have.
But we can plan for it, right? So that we can work towards it. I mean, it would be good to have, because we do have a high need. We have a few overpasses, and it's the train traffic is a big hindrance to mobility. So that's my suggestion, is to add that somewhere in the plan.
That's good. Yes, and the freight and logistics infrastructure plan will very much be partnering with Union Pacific and with Kansas City Southern to be talking about what are their plans for growth. So I had that call with them a couple months ago, talking about, okay, here's what you're doing right now, but what do you need for infrastructure in terms of the future? How can we partner with you on that? And one of the big discussions we talked about was where you see Union Pacific and Kansas City Southern on the east, Union Pacific on the north, their transit stations, their depots. There's a lot of planning we can do to make sure as the city continues to grow, we don't create conflicts around those, and we have the proper land use. So we're definitely curating those relationships with them.
I was just going to add, Councilmember Perez. I think that was regarding El Metro going over the rail.
I'm sorry, who's speaking right now?
Sorry, this is Jason Hosa for the record. I was just asking Ms. Perez if you were talking about the bus going over the rail or the... Oh.
No, it wasn't specific to the bus. It was just, the need for more overpasses. I know there's some areas, and I didn't know if that was in any of the plans.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, next we have item 6 is director's comments. I guess you've already given your comments. Is that correct, Kirby?
Yes, sir.
All right. Then item 7 is motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any opposed? Motion carries. You all have a wonderful day. Thank you, guys. Appreciate